All right, so for our next project, we are going to be making a phone case and a phone holder. Now, phone cases are really interesting CAD projects because you can actually download pre-made CAD files of your phone that you have right now. In fact, you can find lots and lots of different pre-made CAD files all over the internet. Places like TurboSquid, GrabCAD, even Autodesk has its own gallery website where people can upload all of their own projects. So you guys can check out lots and lots of different cool things that people are making in the exact same program that we're working with today. The good thing about a phone is that you can actually use it as a really good reverse engineering project. If you guys have access to a pair of calipers, they're relatively inexpensive. You can basically just go ahead and measure your phone and say, oh, it's exactly this long by that much. Oh, the camera is about this high. This is how thick it is. And you can kind of reverse engineer it. So it's a really fantastic project if you guys want to stop this video now and try and recreate your phone as close as you can get it, and then come back and we're going to be making a custom case that you guys can actually 3D print if you want. Now, like I said, you can download all the CAD files and you can go through what we've done before with the skull in the silicon molding class, where you can import an STL, go through a mesh, turn it into a B-rep, and then it's a little bit easier to work with. But for this one, if you guys would like to just download the Fusion file that we have available on our website, you can import it and then you can follow along with me. So I'm going to go into my data panel. You can see I've already got a folder called the phone case and stand, and I would like to upload one of our files. So you can just select the file. We've got one called iPhone 12 model. And as soon as you double click this, you can start to upload that Fusion file directly into it. And then you can click and drag this into a new project. So it's already completed. So this is now its own component, its own separate file. So let's make one and save it right here. So we can just call this phone assembly, whatever you want to call it. Or you can spell it correctly if you want to. We can save this. You can see it pops up right below it. And then when we click and drag our phone model into it, you can see that we've already got our component already linked into it. And we can just keep it in the correct orientation. And you can see we've got a basically finished phone. It's rough in some areas, but for now, this will work just fine with us. Basically a big glass sandwich, but that's going to be okay for us. So let's close this data panel and we can start off by making a new component. This one is going to be an internal component called our phone case, and it's going to basically wrap around all of the geometry of our phone that we can actually project onto any of our features, and we can work around it. So the plan of action for this phone case is that we want to basically be making a bumper that wraps all the way around our phone and kind of conforms around the general profile of a phone, which is usually symmetric and not all that complicated. Then afterwards, we can cut through any of the holes for our buttons, power switch, charging ports, anything like that. And then we can add in any interesting fillets, and then we'll be popping into all of our assembly areas. Now, it's a little hard to see if we can get a head-on view, but if we were to try to make a sketch right here where our curve is, we're going to end up running into a lot of issues when we finally sweep this around our entire profile. So we'll start off today by changing our document settings from inches back to millimeters. Much more common that things that are manufactured not in the United States, more likely they'll work in millimeters a little bit easier. But still in our phone case activated component, we're going to be making a new offset plane from the very bottom that is 50 millimeters upwards. And by making a new sketch on that offset plane, we can now start to project some of the curves that we have on our phone case, so we can make a new bumper that basically goes around, or it follows the contour of that shape. So let's click P for project, and then basically select all of the points, all of the nodes around this phone. And then the top and bottom surfaces as well. There we go. It may be a little tricky to select on all the points, but it's a heck of a lot easier than selecting all these flat lines. That can get kind of complicated very quickly, because it's very easy to accidentally select an entire face, and then you're dealing with a lot more data points, and it's just kind of a pain. So just these outer points and then these top and bottom horizontal lines, that'll be perfect for us. Then we can connect all of those points with our line tool. This is going to make our lives a lot easier. If you guys take a look at this phone model, you'll find that it's just a very small step down, a 45-degree chamfer. Then that'll give us our entire thickness, and then that profile is mirrored on the other side as well. There we go. Now, because we want a phone case that actually follows around the profile of this, we can be using our offset tool again. This can be found in our modify section, or you can type the letter O for this. This is a very common tool if you're ever designing anything that basically has to fit around a pre-existing model. So you can go and select all of these lines. There we go. And we want to set this as an offset of about 2 millimeters. This will give us a good amount of thickness for a phone case that if you accidentally drop it, it is pretty protected. Now, to cap off this profile, we're going to be clicking L for our line tool again, and just making 2 vertical lines on either side. We can use our collinear tool to make sure these 2 lines are perfectly on top of each other. So if we try and move one, the other one moves as well. And to be consistent with that 2 millimeters distance all the way around, we can just set these 2 top points as 2 millimeters away from each other. And now that we have this kind of sky blue in the middle, it means it is a fully enclosed area. But you can see that we do have this kind of weird extended line that goes over there. Technically, this isn't going to be an issue, but if I hand this file off to another person that I'm working with and they go, oh, I don't really need that, delete. I've now messed up a big part, and if they didn't notice that this point to this point is also eradicated, then it will ruin the entire project. So we're going to be introducing a new tool under Modify called Break. This is where we can essentially have 2 different lines that intersect, and we can say, okay, cut it in half. So we can break, and if you move over, you can see a little red cross right there. So now instead of 1 continuous line, we've got 2 lines on either side. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom line as well. There we go. And then I can type T for trim, which is also under the modify section. And I can click and drag my cursor to cut through either side. As I do this, you can see that I've also gotten rid of my offset dimension. So now all of these can be moved around in ways that we don't want. So this is where we can go back into our fix tool and then fix all of these. They're not moving around on us in ways that we really don't want. And we can finish this sketch. So to have this profile be mapped all the way around our entire phone, we can actually use our sweeping tool again. So our profile is going to be the one we've just made, and then the path is just going to be a single line that tracks all the way around the phone. You can basically click any of these that you would like. And as soon as you do that, it will follow all the way around, because we also have something called chain selection right there, which means all of the line, curve, it will chain them together in one continuous loop. If you have this unchecked, you'll have to select every single line that makes up that profile, which kind of a pain. We can click OK, and now this is looking about maybe like 90% done. But as you can see, we don't have any access to turn up the volume, turn off our phone, or even charge it on the bottom. So let's change that. Let's make a series of cutouts. So to do this, I'm going to be making a new sketch on that bottom surface of our phone case, and I'm just going to be making a very simple trapezoid, nothing too crazy. But I want to have these lines be totally parallel. I want to have these angled lines be equal as well. The distance of this bottom line is going to be 50 millimeters, and then the angle of this can be anything you would like. I found 100 degrees looks about right. And I want to basically have this top point line up with the top line of my phone case, so it cuts it all the way through. And this bottom line will also line up with this line right here. And this is calling for our project tool as normal, so type P for project, and I would like to click this top line right there, and then this bottom line right there. And then I can use my collinear tool to line up both of these. There we go, with that point. And I can also use my point tool to make it totally symmetric as well. So you can see anytime I've got that triangle, that means it is the midpoint of that line. And then if I move over, I can see the midpoint of our sketched line as well. So I want to make these 2 points totally coincident or in the same location, and then that means this sketch is fully defined. Now I can finish that and then extrude this profile, or both of these profiles actually, through our piece as well. But what you'll find is not only am I cutting it through my phone case, but I'm also cutting it into my phone as well, which we don't want. So if you expand this bottom section of the extrude dialog box where it says objects to cut, you can see it says body 1. But if I were to make this phone or the imported model as my main folder and then make all of my components below it, then it would say body 1, which is our phone case, and the phone model as well. So you would just check one or uncheck the other. We can also add on a little chamfer onto this top edge as well of about 1 millimeter. Now when I extruded that, I do have some kind of sharp corners right there on either side. So let's get some fillets to knock those down. So I can select that external and that internal corner on both sides. And then this is going to be receiving a 4 millimeter radius. So it kind of swoops on either side, but I do have this little bit of surface area that's kind of holding this phone in place. That's perfect. We can also make a backing to this phone case as well, so it's not just a bumper. And we can make a new sketch on the very back side of our phone case. And I want to click P for project and then select the back side of the phone, so I do have all the information about where this cutout is. This will be more important later down the line. And by clicking OK, I can now make that little circle on the middle, if you like that special logo that goes in the middle. And we can dimension this to be 25 millimeters, let's say. So to centralize the little hole in the middle, I can just add some points that are along the midpoint of our projected line. So I'm just scrolling down until I see, there we go, that little triangle icon there. I can do the same thing for the bottom as well. And then using my horizontal and vertical constraint, I can just snap them to the middle of both of them. And that'll centralize that hole. Perfect. Then we can finish this sketch and then extrude that surface downwards. So it's currently on level with the top of my phone, and I want to have just a little bit of wiggle room on the underside of this. So I'm going to go down negative 1.9 inches that is joined to the back of this phone. There we go. So the last bit of information that I need to know about for the CAD portion of this is where are all of the buttons that I could use to adjust the volume, the vibrate, the power, the SIM card potentially. Where are they? And I need to basically be able to see through this phone case to look at the phone on the inside. So that's why I'm going to go into my browser, right-click my phone case, and then change the opacity control to something about 50%. That way I can see through my phone case and you can see the buttons just through it. So with that said, let's make a new sketch on the left-hand side of our phone case. And this is very simply just going to be a slot that we can cut out through the phone case so we can get access to the vibrate and then the volume up and down buttons. So let's go into our create section. For our slot, we can just say the center to center slots. You can basically use any of those that you'd like. And just make a general slot shape. As far as the dimensions go, this is based on your phone. So go ahead and measure and see exactly what it would prefer to be. Most buttons are actually about 2.5 millimeters in width. So let's double that. Let's make the distance from either side of this slot to be 5 millimeters. There we go. We also want to make sure that the midline of our slot lines up in the middle of our phone. So I can just select that and select the origin and apply a coincident relationship. And then I really don't care about the size of my slot or the location up and down. It is purely just used to cover the entire button. So at your own discretion, you can go ahead and mess around with the height of this slot so it looks about right to you. As soon as it's the correct length and the correct location, we can just fix the endpoints of our slot and then click Finish Sketch. Then we can extrude that profile right the way through our phone case and click OK. Now we have access to all of our buttons. So I can do a similar operation to the other side of my phone, but as you can see, as I start to do more and more sketches, it gets a little harder to see exactly where my on and off power button is because it's kind of overlaid over the volume buttons as well. So what we can do is add in a section analysis to basically cut away the other half of the phone that we don't need. So we can add in this section analysis, which is under our inspect menu. I'm going to be clicking the right plane and then pulling this over. And this is the half that I actually don't want to see. So let's flick that around to 180 degrees. There we go. And now it's only showing us the right-hand side of the phone, which is what we're looking for. Now this is purely just an analysis, so it's not like it deleted the other half. If you want to go into your browser, you can actually turn back on that section analysis. This is purely just used so it's a little bit easier to make all of our cutouts. So you can make a sketch on the right-hand side of the phone case, and now you can see there is only one slot for our power button, so much easier to see what's going on. We can go into our Create section and add in a perfectly normal slot. Nothing groundbreaking here. We do want to make it that similar 5mm in width. We want to line it up with the origin, so it's running right down the middle. And then you guys can move the length of the slot so it lines up pretty neatly with the power button, so everything looks correct. Again, there's no need to make this absolutely on the dot perfect. It's just what you guys think looks correct. So I can finish off this sketch by fixing the two endpoints, finishing that sketch, and then extruding that profile right the way through our phone case. And then turning off that analysis, and that will give us what our final phone case looks like. So I'm going to turn the opacity back up to 100% so we can actually see what we're doing. And I want to knock off some of these kind of sharp corners on there. So let's again add some more fillets to the outside edge of both of our cutouts that we just made, as well as that hole on the outside. And this can be like a 1mm radius, nothing too intensive. So currently our phone case is actually looking pretty good. It is wrapping around our phone in all the right areas. We've got the cutouts for all of our buttons. This looks great, but we can also do a little test to make sure we don't have any overlap. Any errors that we may have overlooked, where basically the phone and the phone case are sharing the same volume, which is absolutely something we don't want. So that is an inspection test that we can look into. So you can go into our inspect menu, check out interference, and we can basically select our phone and our case and then say, hey, compute. So any place that it finds where there's overlap, it'll say this amount of volume, and it'll highlight in red where it is. Oh, and bad luck, it looks like we do have some interference, and you can see in red, it is where our camera bump is actually running into our phone case right there. So that means we have to modify this in some way. Now to fix this problem, this is where your skill sets are going to be coming into place. So I want you guys to go ahead and scan through your timeline and see if you can correctly cut out the profile of our camera bump and then run a secondary interference test so you know that our phone case isn't bumping into our phone whatsoever. And now if you have done that process correctly, you should be able to go into your inspect, interference, select your phone and your phone case and compute it, and it should say no interference is detected. I hope you guys did it. So I'm going to go and activate the very top component. This is our assembly file. And now you can see we've got our phone case and our phone looking pretty snazzy. But now we can add in all of our appearances to our phone case. So let's go ahead and type A for appearance. And for this class, I would like to put on a carbon fiber look onto this. It always looks really cool. And we can actually go into what Fusion assigns as all of the bump maps and the roughness maps as well. So if we type in carbon fiber, you'll actually see that we've got a few to mess around. We've got carbon fiber plane, carbon fiber twill, and then the rest of them are just different 3D printable plastics that actually have carbon fibers infused directly into it. The difference between the plane and the twill, as far as I can tell, is literally just the pattern of which the carbon fibers are basically threaded together. So you can just decide whether plane or twill looks the best to you. I think twill looks a little bit more interesting. So by double clicking on our appearance that we've applied to our part, we can also mess around with the color of the carbon fiber if we want to. A blue is a really common colorant to put into carbon fiber, but black is definitely the most common. So this is a mixture of a color and an image that we can have in Fusion360. So if you go into the advanced section, not only do we have a diffused color instead of an image, but we also have an added image of our roughness. So if we expand this down, you can see that we have got a bump pattern, which is this kind of crazy purpley bluish type. And this is the most common relief bump image that you're likely to come across. So if you guys go and search up different bump patterns that you want to apply to different projects, and you go, well, I can't see any of these black and white images, it's only coming up as these purple weird stuff. This is what most bump patterns actually look like. It'll be read in the exact same way in Fusion360, but it'll work in a very similar way, where if you want to, you can change the position of where is the actual fibers crossing over, if you want to change the angle or the depth amount as well. So when you plug it into the render workspace, it'll look a little bit more three-dimensional. This is where we can mess around and edit bitmaps really easily as well. So to push the appearance of this project even further, we're going to be adding something known as a decal. Now, if we close this down and go into our insert menu, you can see that we've got our canvas, which is what we used for the football, where it's basically just an image that you can put on a plane. You can scale it, you can rotate it, you can move it around that plane, but it's kind of limited. But what happens if we want to put a picture on our part? And if it has any curves, that we actually want it to map around all the curves as well? Well, this is where decals come in. And a decal is a really good way where you can add a lot of realism to any parts that you have. You can add in any image that you would like. Usually PNGs work the best. A PNG is just an image with a transparent background. That's why you'll see all of those little gray and white checker box on a lot of images. We've supplied our logo for this project, where you can just select this back face and you can see it will pop up, and we can scale it any which size we want. We can, well, pull it in any which direction that you'd like. And we can also rotate it. And what you'll notice is that if you have any curved surfaces like we do, when you actually pull it down, it will conform around all of the curves, which does look kind of trippy. It always looks kind of cool if you've got any logos of any teams that are sponsoring you, or if you've designed any artwork yourself, you can actually pop it on any Fusion project that you're working on. So we can increase the scale, move it around so it's in about the right location. I think that looks just about perfect. And then we can click OK. So if we just pop back into the rendering workspace, we can kind of see just how realistic this carbon fiber can actually look. Carbon fiber is, well, it's carbon fibers that are sewed together, so they're incredibly strong. And then they're usually coated in a very thin layer of resin or epoxy. And so it's usually very, very slick and shiny. And because it's carbon fiber, they're incredibly lightweight. So you can see all of the, photography lights reflected off of this shiny phone case. So you can make very, very photorealistic objects very, very quickly in this. But we'll be doing a little bit more of a deep dive into the rendering workspace later down the line. So let's head back to the design workspace. Now we'll be adding on our last component, where we can just add in new component. Again, this is going to be an internal, and this can be named wooden block or phone stand or whatever you'd really like. And because this is going to be a phone stand, and usually phones aren't totally vertically, they're kind of tilting back just a little bit, we can type M for move, we don't want to move the bodies, we would actually like to move the components. We want to move the phone and the phone case as well, so we can just tilt it back something like 20 degrees. That works just fine. Then we can make a new sketch on the right-hand plane where we would like to capture that position, that 20-degree lean. And this is where you guys can put in any geometry that you would like. I'm just going to be making a very simple wooden block that I can see myself making out of something like a bit of oak, potentially. But you guys can design it in any which way that you would like. So the model that I've made here is literally just something that I just made up right now. There's no reason to make something super duper complicated, just whatever you think will work. So let's finish this sketch and then extrude this profile outwards. So I want this phone stand to be totally symmetric about the middle of my phone. And instead of starting off from my profile, I can actually start off from an offset. And I'm going to make the offset half the width of this phone. So I can just type in 73.5, which is the width of my phone, and say divided by 2. Then I can set my direction to totally symmetric. And again, it doesn't need to be any perfect number, just as long as it extends just past that phone. And then we can add on some nice fillets to either of those flat faces. I've set it to 5mm just so it matches the exact same radii that I had on my 2D sketch. So I want this to be a wooden block, so I'm going to go into our appearance and look up different woods. Now, very often, just on your screen, Fusion likes to make things look a little bit darker than they really should. So if I add on something like walnut, which is normally kind of like a chocolatey brown color, it looks almost black. It's super, super dark. I can't get a ton of information on it. Similar thing goes for mahogany or teak. The colors just kind of get faded away and you don't get any kind of the lovely grain or colors that pop out of wood. So I always usually go for bamboo or oak or pine. These things just have a little bit more color. They kind of go into it. It's a little easier to see. I'm going to pop on an oak to this just because it's a really nice wood that a lot of woodworkers like to use. But let's go ahead and check out something called a texture map control, because right now the grain is running in all really strange directions. I can see the grain on this face is running that way, but then the grain on that face is running that way, and that's totally wrong. The grain of wood is always flowing in one direction. It goes either the direction that the tree was growing upwards or downwards. There's never these kind of weird directions. That's totally, totally strange. I can also change around the scale really quick, because I can see this is really zoomed in. So let's change that. Let's make the scale a little bit lower. That looks just about right. What I'm doing right now is literally how a lot of CAD people do their entire job, where they're just kind of sitting there and going, that looks about right. There's no math, there's no numbers. It is just what does your designing eye think looks about right? In CAD especially, there's lots and lots of areas where things need to be exactly this dimension, exactly this angle, this needs to fit into that slot perfectly. But in scenarios like appearances, it is purely just what do you think looks right? So really lean into that. Bring out that artistic bone in your body and kind of apply it to as much of appearance CAD as you can. But let's close this down and then let's change around some of the texture. And this is going to be using something called a texture map control. So I'm going to right click on our phone stand component, and just under appearances, I've got texture map controls. Now what this little dialog box is saying is it's trying to come up with some geometric shape that it can map all of that image of the wood around. Currently it's set to automatic, which is usually not perfect. The automatic kind of uses a mixture of what it thinks. So is it a sphere? Is it a cylinder? Is it just a plane? Is it a box? It's just trying to make it up as it goes along. But now we can say exactly what it is. So just as an example, if we say, yeah, this is a sphere, it's obviously not, but if we say that it's a sphere, and we can click around on any of our unit or any of our different axes, that we can mess it around, then you can see when I move around these dial, it's kind of conforming in a really funky way that I'm not feeling. It just looks strange, and you get all these kind of like angles where the one image meets the other, and it just very strange. So I think for this project, a box is more accurate to what it is. It's got a lot of these linear lines and all these planar faces. So now we can click and drag around all of these ring icons so we can make sure the grain is running roughly what I'm looking for. If me as a woodworker was going to be making this, then I would probably want the grain to be running along this flat edge right here. So I can just click and drag this so the line of this grain is roughly parallel to this back face right here. I can change it around as well. So you can see that the grain in this direction is kind of going up and off an angle. Don't want that, so let's kind of correct it. So you can go through and adjust all of these in all different dimensions so it looks just right for your project. So I think this project is looking pretty done. So let's activate our top component, bring it into the rendering workspace, and there we are. Perfectly fantastic phone stand with a really cool carbon fiber phone case.